In a quiet mountain town, where the wind carries the scent of pine and rain, a father and his little girl stop at a street corner, and their world changes forever. A broken sign reads $10 for the beast, and beside it lies a dog too thin to fight for himself, yet too proud to beg. What happens when compassion costs only $10, but redeems a lifetime of sorrow? This is the story of Atlas, the German shepherd who carried more than scars, and the family who discovered that sometimes saving a life means saving your own. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments and join us on this journey of faith, love, and second chances. Too long. The homeless man noticed them and spoke in a cracked voice, half plea, half indifference. $10, mister. Take him. He eats too much. His breath smelled of cheap whiskey and windburn. Caleb frowned. You're selling your dog? The man shrugged, scratching his beard. Ain't my dog no more. He just followed me after his last master got tired of him. Guess he thinks I'm someone worth following. He gave a bitter chuckle. Poor bastard. Lily crouched, ignoring the mud, and reached out her hand. The shepherd lifted his head, but didn't move closer, tail barely twitching. His eyes, those haunting human eyes, met hers. She saw not a beast, but a question. Daddy, she said softly. Maybe God wants us to help him. Caleb exhaled, long and slow, like the air itself had weight. Lily, we can't save every dog out there. I know, she said, voice trembling. But maybe we can save this one. He looked at her, the stubborn lift of her chin, the way her small shoulders squared against the wind, and saw his late wife, Sarah, all over again. Sarah had been a nurse at the county clinic, tall and slender, with a smile that could calm even the meanest logger after a bad day. She used to bring home injured strays from the roadside, patching them with the same gentle hands she used on people. When cancer took her, Caleb promised Lily they'd keep helping in small ways. But promises were easy when grief was new. Now, looking at this shivering shepherd, that old promise pressed against his ribs. How old is he? Caleb asked. The man scratched his neck. 4, maybe 5, hard to tell. Got him from someone in Red Meadow who trains police dogs. Guess he flunked out. Caleb dug a $10 bill from his wallet. It was supposed to be for gas. Here, he said quietly. The man snatched the bill like it might disappear. Without a thank you, he rose and walked away, staggering down the alley. The dog didn't follow. Lily moved closer, her breath making small clouds. Hey there, boy, she murmured. It's okay now. The shepherd watched her, head tilted, as if listening to something far away. When she stretched her hand to his muzzle, he hesitated, then leaned forward, slowly, carefully, until his nose touched her palm. It was a fragile moment, like glass not yet cracked. Caleb knelt beside them. Guess we'll need a name, he said. Lily smiled through the chill. Atlas, she decided instantly, because he looks like he's been carrying the whole world. Caleb blinked, surprised by how right it sounded. The dog gave a faint sigh, lying his head on the girl's knees. The streetlight above flickered once, and for the first time that evening, Caleb felt the wind lose some of its bite. They walked home slowly. The clouds had deepened, bruised purple against the mountains. Lily held the frayed leash they'd found tied to the dog's collar. Atlas followed without pulling, silent, every step deliberate, as though he'd been waiting for this path all his life. People turned to watch them, some with pity, some with annoyance. But Lily just hummed the tune her mother used to sing, Somewhere the light still falls on the lost. When they reached their small house on Oak Ridge Lane, a weathered one-story with paint peeling around the porch, Caleb opened the door and gestured. Come on, Atlas, let's see if we can find you a warm spot. Inside, the kitchen glowed with the amber of old bulbs. The smell of soup and pine cleaner hung in the air. Lily guided Atlas to a mat near the stove and poured him water. The dog sniffed, then drank in cautious gulps, ears twitching at every sound. His tail brushed the floor once, twice, like a test of belonging. Caleb leaned on the counter, watching. We'll get him checked tomorrow, he said. No telling what shape he's in. Lily nodded, wrapping a towel around the dog's shoulders. He's in God's shape now, she replied simply. The words struck something deep in Caleb. He wanted to believe her. For months, faith had been like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. But tonight, with the storm gathering outside and a stranger's dog asleep by his daughter's feet. He wondered if Grace sometimes arrived disguised as trouble. Later, after dinner, Lily fell asleep on the couch, her hand resting on Atlas's back. The dog's breathing steadied, rhythmic, like ocean tides finding shore. Caleb sat nearby with the old family Bible open but unread. The wind howled through the pines outside, and the first flakes of snow drifted past the window. He reached down and brushed his fingers lightly over the shepherd's collar. Beneath the rust and grime, faint numbers were engraved into the metal. X21. Caleb frowned, the detail lodging somewhere in memory, but he said nothing. Atlas stirred, opening one amber eye. For a heartbeat their gazes met, the tired man and the tired dog, and something wordless passed between them, a shared understanding of loss and the faint, flickering courage to keep going. Outside, the storm thickened. Inside, under the modest kitchen light, warmth pooled like mercy. The beast was no longer for sale. The first snow of the season arrived overnight, turning Silver Creek into a quiet painting of white and gray. By dawn, the pine trees behind the Hayes house were heavy with frost, their branches sagging like tired arms. The air smelled of smoke and cold iron. Inside the small wooden house, light from the kitchen windows spilled across the floor, golden and soft, as if trying to hold back winter itself. Caleb was up early, as usual. He moved with the practiced rhythm of a man who needed purpose more than sleep. He brewed coffee, the old percolator hissing softly, and glanced toward the living room. There, on the worn plaid couch, Lily slept curled up under a quilt, one hand dangling off the edge, fingers brushing the fur of Atlas. The dog lay close beside her, his body tense even in rest, breathing shallow, ears twitching at every creak of the old house. Atlas was cleaner now, though still thin. His coat, once dull and patchy, caught faint glimmers of tan beneath the black along his back. But up close, the scars told his story better than any words. Around his neck, the fur grew uneven over a ring of healed abrasions, marks left by a collar too tight, worn too long. His hind leg bore a pale, jagged scar running from the hip to the paw, the kind that came from either a blade or a trap. Each movement made him wince, but he never whimpered. Caleb sat at the table, mug in hand, studying him. The man had seen enough broken machinery at the mill to recognize damage that ran deep, damage that couldn't be fixed with just care. He wondered what kind of men had hurt this animal, and what kind of world allowed it. A soft yawn broke his thoughts. Lily stirred, pushing the quilt aside. Her hair was a tangled halo in the morning light. "He didn't sleep much," she said, voice heavy with concern. "Every time the wind blew, he woke up." Caleb smiled faintly. "It takes time to forget bad nights." She slid off the couch and knelt beside Atlas. "Morning, Atlas," she whispered, rubbing behind his ear. The shepherd's tail brushed once against the floor, but his eyes remained wary, scanning the room like a soldier expecting orders. "Can I give him a bath, Dad?" Caleb hesitated. "You sure he'll let you?" "I think he trusts me," Lily said simply. They filled a metal tub in the kitchen sink. The house smelled of warm water and lavender soap. Steam fogged the window, while snow kept falling outside. Lily rolled up her sleeves and coaxed Atlas forward with a slice of leftover bacon. He stepped in slowly, uncertain, claws clicking against the tin bottom. The moment the warm water touched him, he flinched, his muscles stiffening, eyes darting toward the door. "Shh," Lily murmured. "It's okay, you're safe." Her small hands worked carefully, rubbing the suds through his fur, lifting away the dirt and dried mud. Beneath the grime, his true color emerged, a rich sable coat fading to bronze near his paws. As she worked, she hummed the same tune her mother used to sing. The rhythm steadied the dog's breathing. For a moment, even the wind seemed to quiet. Caleb dried him with an old towel, noticing again the scar on the hind leg. "Someone used him for work," he muttered. "Or worse." Lily looked up. "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "Nothing you need to worry about yet." But his eyes darkened. Later that night, while Lily drew pictures at the table, Caleb examined the collar he had removed. It was a heavy strip of metal with crude weld marks, the kind not sold in pet stores. Stamped faintly inside, the rust was a number, X21. The memory tugged at something buried deep from his years in the sheriff's office before he quit after Sarah's death. He'd once heard about coded collars used in illegal K-9 fighting rings across state lines. But those operations had vanished, or so he thought. He set the collar down and rubbed his temples. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." The evening darkened early, as it always did in the mountains. The storm outside built into a slow, steady rhythm against the windows. Lily sat cross-legged on the rug, brushing Atlas's coat with the gentleness of a prayer. The dog rested beside her, half asleep, until a distant rumble of thunder rolled through the valley. The change was instant. Atlas jerked upright, growling low, eyes wide and wild. He backed into the corner by the door, tail tucked tight, body trembling. Lily froze, brush still in her hand. "Dad!" she called. Caleb moved quickly, crouching near but not touching the dog. "Easy, boy, you're okay." Atlas barked once, hoarse, broken, the sound of panic pressed into flesh. Then he whimpered and lowered his head, shivering. The thunder rolled again, and he curled tightly against the wall, breathing fast. Caleb waited until the storm passed before moving closer. "He's been through something bad," he said quietly. "That sound, it means something to him." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Did someone hurt him when it thundered?" "Maybe," Caleb said. "Or maybe he remembers the sound of something worse." She laid her hand gently on Atlas's paw. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," she whispered. "You're home now." The shepherd blinked, his trembling slowing. He pressed his nose against her palm and sighed. Caleb watched the two of them, the child who believed in miracles and the creature learning to believe again, and felt a sting behind his eyes. After Lily went to bed, he stayed up late, sitting by the dim kitchen lamp. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional sigh of the heater. He turned the collar over in his hands again, tracing the numbers. X21. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he could almost hear the voice of his old captain from years ago. "There's a file we never closed. Red Kennel Project, classified dogs, experimental training gone. Wrong, we lost track of them after the case was dropped." Caleb looked toward the sleeping dog by the window. Could this be one of them? He stood, opened the drawer where he kept his old sheriff's badge, still tarnished but whole. He placed it next to the collar, the two relics of past lives staring back at him. "Looks like you brought the past to my doorstep," he murmured. Atlas twitched in his sleep, paws moving slightly, as if running through some distant nightmare. Caleb noticed how his breathing quickened when the wind rattled the window pane. He rose quietly, took the old quilt from the couch, and draped it over the dog. The moment the fabric touched him, Atlas let out a small sigh and settled. Caleb sat back, watching. "Rest easy, soldier," he said softly. "You've done your fighting." When dawn came again, the storm had cleared. Silver Creek shone beneath a thin layer of ice, rooftops glittering under pale sunlight. Lily woke first, running to the window. "Dad, look, it's beautiful." Caleb joined her, mug in hand. The world outside was bright and cold, the kind of morning that made breath look like smoke from a small fire. Atlas padded up behind them, the limp in his leg faint but visible. He sat beside Lily, watching the light spread across the snow. "You think he likes it here?" she asked. Caleb looked down at the shepherd, who was watching a bird hop across the fence. "I think he's trying to remember how." In that quiet moment, with the mountains shimmering beyond and the scent of pine drifting through the open door, Caleb realized something simple and strange. This broken dog had brought a pulse back into their house. It wasn't loud or easy, but it was life. And in its own way, it felt holy. Outside, the wind shifted through the pines, carrying with it the faint echo of thunder, now distant, softened by snow. Atlas lifted his head but did not flinch. Instead, he pressed closer to Lily's leg, eyes half closed in peace. For the first time since Sarah's passing, Caleb whispered a prayer, not for strength, but for gratitude. Winter settled heavy over Silver Creek, the kind that muted every sound except the whisper of the wind through pine. The small town seemed frozen in amber. Smokestacks curled their ghosts into gray skies, and the roads glittered with salt and slush. It had been 3 weeks since Caleb and Lily brought Atlas home, and though the world outside was brittle with cold, inside their modest house a quiet warmth had returned. Atlas had gained weight. His fur now shone under sunlight like polished bronze and onyx, though the scars still spoke faintly through the coat. His limp was fading, and his eyes, once guarded, had begun to soften, especially when Lily came near. He followed her from room to room, never far, never intrusive, like a silent shadow rediscovering trust. Yet sometimes, when the night deepened and the pines moaned, he would rise and stand by the back door, ears pricked toward the forest that began just beyond the fence. Caleb noticed it first. The way Atlas watched the tree line every morning as though waiting for someone. The dog's posture was always the same, head slightly tilted, eyes fixed on some unseen point in the woods, body tense but not fearful. There was something deliberate, even mournful about it. One Saturday afternoon, Caleb was fixing the porch railing when Lily came running out, coat half zipped, cheeks flushed from play. "Dad, he's doing it again," she said, pointing toward the trees. Atlas stood in the snow, unmoving, nose lifted to the wind. A low growl trembled in his chest, not aggressive, more like longing given sound. Caleb wiped his hands on his jeans and joined her. "You think he hears something?" Lily nodded. "Or someone." The woods of Silver Creek stretched far beyond their backyard, miles of pine and birch, dotted with hunting cabins and old logging roads that no longer led anywhere. Caleb's instinct told him to keep Atlas close. He'd learned long ago that forests had a way of keeping secrets. That night, the temperature dropped below zero, the sky turned the color of ash, and the world held its breath. Caleb sat by the fireplace mending a torn glove, while Lily sketched Atlas by the window, using charcoal smudged on scrap paper. The dog lay beside her, chin on paws, half asleep. The peace was deep enough to be fragile. Then, from outside, came a faint sound, sharp and distant. A metallic clatter, followed by a short, desperate bark. Atlas's head shot up. He growled once, then bounded toward the door. "Atlas, wait!" Caleb called, but the shepherd was already gone, bursting through the half-closed door and into the snow. Caleb grabbed his coat, flashlight, and rifle by instinct. "Stay here, Lily!" he shouted. "No!" she cried, grabbing her red scarf. "I'm coming!" He turned, ready to argue, but one look at her, frightened, determined, told him it was useless. "Fine, but stay behind me." They followed Atlas's prints across the yard and into the forest. The snow swallowed their footsteps, the wind biting at their faces. The beam of the flashlight flickered through the pines, catching fragments of movement, branches trembling, flakes falling, the fleeting shadow of the dog ahead. "Atlas!" Caleb called. "Come!" No answer, only the crunch of their boots and the far-off moan of wind through the trees. Then the dog barked again. Closer this time, urgent. They found him near an old dirt road half buried under snow. He stood rigid before a rotting wooden barn, its roof caved in and doors hanging crooked. The sign above the entrance had almost faded away, but under the flashlight's glare, Caleb could still read the letters. Project Red Kennel, X21. His stomach turned cold. The name was like a ghost from another life. "Dad," Lily whispered, "what is this place?" Caleb's voice was low, almost reverent with dread. A mistake the world tried to bury. He pushed the barn door open. The hinges screamed. Inside, the air was heavy with mold, rust, and something older. Grief that had seeped into the wood. His flashlight swept across rows of empty steel cages, each one lined with straw blackened by time. Broken leashes hung like nooses from hooks. Faded stains marked the floor in dark patterns that didn't need explanation. Lily clutched his sleeve. "What happened here?" Caleb didn't answer. His beam caught on a torn folder pinned to the wall, its edges eaten by damp. Faded text read, "Unit X21, Behavioral Trials." Beneath it, a list of dogs, numbered and crossed out. Only one number wasn't, X21. Atlas stepped forward, sniffing the air. His body stiffened. He began to whine softly, a sound that broke into a series of short, trembling barks. He walked to one of the cages and sat before it, tail low, ears back. Caleb knelt beside him and ran his hand over the rusted bars. "You were here, weren't you?" he murmured. "This is where they made you fight." The shepherd didn't move. He only stared into the dark cage, as if looking for ghosts. Thunder rumbled faintly beyond the hills, an echo from a distant storm rolling over the ridge. Atlas flinched, backing away. His breath quickened. Caleb stood and took out his phone, snapping photos of the room, the faded sign, the folder, evidence, habit, instinct. Something in him, long dormant, began to stir. The old investigator who used to chase truth for a living. He turned to Lily. "We shouldn't stay long. There's no telling who still comes here." They stepped back into the cold, the barn door groaning behind them. The moon was veiled in mist, turning the snow a dull silver. Atlas kept glancing back at the building as they walked, his fur rising slightly. When they reached home, Caleb locked the door and sat at the table, spreading the phone pictures before him. Lily curled beside Atlas on the rug, wrapping him in her scarf. "Dad," she said quietly, "he was trying to show us." Caleb looked up. "Show us what?" "Where he came from," she replied, "so we'd understand." He had no answer. Only silence filled the space between them, thick as snowfall. That night, long after Lily slept, Caleb went to the porch with his coat buttoned tight. The forest loomed in the dark, quiet but alive. He thought of the barn, the cages, the coated collar marked X21. He thought of the men who built such places and the dogs who endured them. Atlas came out and sat beside him, pressing close for warmth. The man rested his hand on the dog's head. "You didn't just run into us, did you?" Caleb said softly. "You came home on purpose." Atlas looked up at him, eyes glowing faintly in the porch light. In their reflection, Caleb saw not just an animal, but a survivor carrying secrets older than words. Somewhere deep in those eyes, he saw something else too. Trust being rebuilt, one heartbeat at a time. The wind rustled through the pines, a whisper like memory. Caleb closed his eyes and listened. The storm broke 3 nights later, leaving the town glazed in ice and uneasy silence. The people of Silver Creek spoke of roofs collapsing and trees snapping under weight, but inside the Hayes house, something else had shifted. Since the night at the barn, Atlas had grown restless again. He paced near the window, nose twitching toward the woods, as if expecting someone or something to follow. Caleb hadn't slept well either. The images from that night haunted him. The cages, the faded logo, the name Project Red Kennel, X21. It gnawed at him like a whisper from his past life. He had worked once with the county sheriff's department, mostly handling animal cruelty and illegal trade cases. It was there he first heard rumors of a program that bred and trained canines for underground fighting circuits, claiming to recondition failed police dogs for profit. But every trail went cold, and now, somehow, one of those ghosts had found his doorstep. That morning, while Lily was at school, Caleb sat at his old oak desk with the worn leather folder that held his retired badge and scattered case files. The sunlight slanted through the frosted window, catching in the steam from his coffee. He thumbed through a folder marked Monroe, Jed, Suspicious Training Operation, 2018. The name hit him like a slap. Jed Monroe, a former K-9 trainer dishonorably discharged after allegations of abuse and trafficking. The file had ended with insufficient evidence, case closed. Caleb whispered to the empty room, "Not anymore." Outside, a truck rumbled past, its tires crunching over the snow. Atlas lifted his head from the rug, ears flicking. He rose slowly, tail low, and went to the door. Caleb followed his gaze. For a fleeting second, he thought he saw a dark figure across the road, someone standing just beyond the fence, watching. But when he blinked, the shadow was gone. By afternoon, the weather had softened, and Lily came home with flushed cheeks and boots caked in slush. She burst through the door, calling for Atlas. The shepherd met her halfway, his bark echoing through the kitchen. She laughed, dropping her backpack to kneel and hug him. "He missed me, Dad." Caleb smiled faintly. "Pretty sure you're the only one who can make him smile." As they settled down to dinner, Lily spoke between bites of stew. "Dad, guess what? I found a puppy near the old bridge by the school." Caleb looked up sharply. "What do you mean you found a puppy?" She motioned toward her coat, and before he could protest, she hurried to the porch. Moments later, she returned carrying a small bundle of gray and tan fur wrapped in a scarf. The pup was trembling violently, its one eye swollen shut, ribs showing through the fur. "Lily?" Caleb began, his voice half warning, half pity. "I couldn't just leave him, Dad," she said, tears glimmering. "He was whimpering, and no one was around. Atlas approached, tail low, but wagging gently. He sniffed the little creature, then stepped between Lily and the door, as if guarding both. When the puppy whimpered, Atlas let out a low, rumbling growl, not at the child, but at something unseen. His gaze darted toward the window again, where the pines stood black against the snow. Caleb crouched beside them. "He's hurt. We'll need to clean that eye." Lily nodded, already cradling the pup against her chest. "His name's Scout," she said suddenly, smiling through her tears. "Because he looks brave, even if he's small." The night passed with soft movements and whispered care. Lily stayed by the fire, holding Scout close while Caleb treated the wound. Atlas lay nearby, watchful, his head resting on his paws. The storm outside deepened, the wind pressing against the windows like an old ghost. When the pup cried out from pain, Atlas rose and positioned himself between the noise and the door. He didn't bark, only stood, muscles taut, growling low. It wasn't threat, but promise. Caleb recognized the posture instantly. "He's protecting him," Caleb murmured. Lily looked up. "Just like he protects us." The warmth of the fire flickered across their faces, painting them in amber light. For a long while, they said nothing. The small house felt alive. 2 humans, 2 dogs, 4 hearts learning how to trust again. Later, when Lily finally fell asleep beside the fire, Scout curled beneath her arm. Caleb sat at the table and opened his laptop. He typed Project Red Kennel, X21 into the search bar. Pages of old reports surfaced. Animal control raids, missing canines, untraceable breeders. Then one image froze him. A group photo of men in military fatigues standing before a row of kennels. On the far left stood a tall, broad-shouldered man with a faded scar running from ear to chin. Jed Monroe, the caption read. Caleb clicked deeper. Monroe now ran a training facility 2 counties away, under a new name, Red Pines Tactical. A chill ran through him. Atlas, lying by the window, gave a low growl. Caleb turned. Outside, snowflakes drifted like ash through the beam of the porch light. A set of fresh footprints led up to the gate. He rose, heart thudding. When he stepped outside, the wind slapped his face, cold and sharp. The track stopped halfway to the fence and vanished. No car, no tire marks, just snow and silence. He returned inside and locked the door. Atlas still stood tense by the window, tail stiff, eyes narrowed toward the dark. "It's starting again, isn't it?" Caleb whispered. "Whoever hurt you, they're not done." The shepherd turned his head, gaze steady, as if answering, "Then we won't be done either." The next morning, Caleb drove to the sheriff's office, leaving Lily with a neighbor. The station hadn't changed since he left. Same smell of stale coffee and paper. Sheriff Don McCready, an old friend, looked up as Caleb entered. "Well, I'll be damned. Hayes, I thought, you retired from digging up ghosts." Caleb placed a photo of the barn on the desk. "Some ghosts dig themselves up." McCready frowned. "Where did you find this?" "Behind my property. It's Red Kennel, Don, one of the sites." The sheriff leaned back. "That case was dead 5 years ago. No evidence, no suspects." Caleb's voice hardened. "Then maybe this is the evidence we missed." McCready rubbed his jaw. "You know what you're suggesting could stir up the wrong people. Monroe's still got connections, trainers, maybe buyers." "Then we end it this time," Caleb said quietly. McCready sighed. "All right, I'll see what I can dig up. But keep your girl safe, and watch that dog. He's part of something bigger than we understand." When Caleb returned home, the sky was bruised with dusk. Lily ran to him, cheeks flushed. "Scout ate a little today," she said proudly. Atlas followed close behind her, eyes bright, a faint limp still in his step. Caleb smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Good. He's got a family now." Lily grinned. "Just like Atlas." Outside, the wind began again, soft but rising. The pines murmured with secrets, and Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Still, for that one evening, the house was filled with life, laughter, the patter of paws, and the faint melody of peace rebuilding itself under the weight of fear. Before bed, Caleb paused by the window, looking at the dark line of the forest. Somewhere beyond those trees lay the truth, ugly, waiting, inevitable. But for now, his daughter was safe, and 2 dogs slept beside her, both scarred, both saved. He whispered to the night, "We're not running anymore." The wind returned with vengeance the following week, turning Silver Creek into a blur of gray and white. Snow lashed against the windows, trees bent beneath gusts that screamed across the ridges, and the power lines crackled like ghosts whispering through the storm. Caleb stood in his uniform again for the first time in years, badge glinting on his jacket, rifle slung across his back. The sheriff had called just after sunset. They'd found a signal. The old Red Pines compound wasn't as abandoned as they thought. Outside, the blizzard howled, erasing distance and direction. Inside, the house pulsed with tension. Lily sat on the couch clutching Scout, who had recovered enough to walk again, but still trembled whenever thunder rolled. Atlas paced by the door, hackles raised, eyes fixed on the storm, as if sensing what waited out there. "You're really going, aren't you?" Lily's voice quivered. Caleb pulled on his gloves. "I have to. Monroe's people are still out there, and if those files are right, there could be dozens of dogs trapped." She bit her lip. "Can Atlas go with you?" Caleb hesitated, then nodded slowly. "He'll lead us better than any GPS." He knelt before her. "You stay inside, no matter what. Sheriff McCready will radio me when it's over." But as he kissed her forehead and opened the door, the storm slammed against the house like a living thing. Snow swirled in, stinging his face. Atlas bounded ahead, barking once into the wind. A rallying cry. The headlights of 2 patrol trucks pierced the white darkness. McCready leaned out from the lead vehicle, shouting, "You ready, Hayes? Let's bring this to an end." They drove into the forest, tires cutting through deep snow. The pines bowed and swayed, their branches snapping under the weight of ice. Atlas rode in the back, staring out the window, nose pressed against the fog glass. Every few miles, he barked once, short and sharp, as if signaling direction. Caleb could feel his pulse sinking with the storm, a rhythm of duty and dread. Halfway through the valley, McCready's voice crackled through the radio. "Compound's heat signatures confirmed. Looks like they're still running cages down there." Caleb gripped the wheel tighter. "Then we move fast." They reached the trailhead where the road ended and snow began. The team, 3 officers and Caleb, stepped out into the howling dark. Flashlights cut weak tunnels through the storm. Atlas moved first, head low, tail stiff. He was silent now, all focus, all instinct. For over an hour they trudged through knee-deep snow until the first structure appeared, a squat metal shed half buried in drifts, its roof sagging under ice. Inside, through the storm's roar, came the faintest sound, a whine, high and desperate. "Dogs," Caleb said. "They're still here," McCready signaled. The men fanned out. The storm masked their footsteps as they approached the chain-link fence, surrounding the compound. Beyond it, dim lights flickered, generator powered, faint but alive. Caleb saw movement, men in heavy coats, flashlights sweeping across the yard. "2 guards," he whispered. "We take them quietly." They advanced through the snow's veil. Atlas moved beside Caleb, every muscle ready. The first guard turned just as the shepherd lunged, knocking him into the drift. The man barely had time to shout before Caleb struck, disarming him with a swift motion. The second guard dropped his flashlight and ran. "Go!" McCready barked. They rushed inside. The metal door burst open to reveal rows of cages, stacked and rusted but still occupied. Dogs of every breed, thin, wounded, eyes wide with terror. The smell of fear and filth hit like a punch. Caleb's flashlight swept across the wall. There it was again. Project Red Kennel, X-21. "McCready, look at this," he said. They never stopped. They just moved deeper. The sheriff cursed under his breath. "Monroe's got a lot to answer for." Atlas barked suddenly, ears forward, body rigid. From the far corner of the room, a door slammed. A shadow moved behind it. Caleb raised his rifle, motioning the others to flank. They kicked the door open. Inside was a narrow hallway lined with more cages, and at the end stood Jed Monroe. He was older now, heavier, his face half hidden behind a gray beard. But the scar from ear to chin was unmistakable. He held a pistol in one hand, flashlight in the other. "Well, I'll be damned," he sneered. "Hayes, thought you quit playing hero." "Put the gun down, Jed," Caleb said, voice low but steady. "It's over." Monroe smirked. Over? You have no idea what you're standing in. These animals were made to serve, to fight, to die if they have to. He kicked a nearby cage. A weak whine answered. Atlas growled, stepping forward. Funny, Monroe taunted, that your precious rescue dog used to belong to me. X-21, he was my best fighter, until he turned soft. Caleb's stomach twisted. You broke him? He said coldly. I built him, Monroe hissed. And if you think he's done fighting, you're wrong. He raised the pistol. Before anyone could move, a small voice echoed from behind them. Dad! Caleb turned. Lily stood in the doorway, snow clinging to her coat, eyes wide with fear. She had followed them. Lily, get back! He shouted. The distraction was enough. Monroe fired. The bullet ricocheted off the metal frame, sparking light. Atlas lunged, a streak of black and tan through chaos, knocking Monroe backward. The gun fell, skidding across the floor. Monroe screamed, swinging wildly, but Atlas's jaws locked on his arm. Hold your fire! Caleb yelled as he rushed forward, kicking the weapon away. McCready pinned Monroe down while Caleb called Atlas off. The shepherd released only when Caleb's hand touched his collar. His chest heaved, eyes still, burning with rage and pain. Outside, sirens wailed through the storm. Backup had arrived. Minutes later, Monroe was in cuffs, bleeding but alive. Officers moved through the building, cutting locks, freeing dogs one by one. Some limped, some crawled, some wagged weak tails. Lily dropped to her knees beside one old shepherd whose muzzle was white with age. It's okay, she whispered. You're safe now. Caleb knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. The storm began to ease, snow turning from fury to flakes. As they led the last of the rescued dogs out, McCready clapped Caleb on the shoulder. Hell of a thing, Hayes. You still got it. Caleb looked down at Atlas, who stood beside him, soaked and trembling but proud. It wasn't me, he said softly. It was him. They walked out into the dawn. The snow had stopped, the sky bruised with the first light of morning. Emergency lights cast red and blue halos on the white ground. Lily wrapped her scarf around Atlas's neck, whispering through tears. You did it, boy. God sent you for this. The shepherd pressed his head against her shoulder, breathing shallow but steady. And as the sun broke over the frozen valley, the storm finally ended, not just outside, but in their hearts. Spring came late to Silver Creek that year. Snow lingered on the rooftops well into March, melting in slow, reluctant rivulets down the gutters. The world was trying to heal, and so were they. The storm, the raid, the long night that nearly took everything. Those memories still lived in the corners of Caleb's mind. But, like frost on a window pane, they thinned a little more each day. A year had passed since the fall of Red Kennel. Jed Monroe was serving his sentence in a federal penitentiary. The news called it the biggest animal rescue in state history. But for Caleb Hayes, the headlines didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet miracle that had unfolded in his own backyard. Where once there had been a patch of overgrown grass, now stood a wooden fence encircling a broad open yard, shaded by pine. A hand-painted sign hung above the gate. Haven under the pines. Below, in Lily's uneven handwriting, it read, A home for every heart that was once forgotten. The center had begun with just 3 dogs, Atlas, Scout, and an old shepherd named Hope, who had survived Monroe's cages. But word spread fast across the county, and now more than a dozen dogs roamed freely beneath the sunlight. Some limped, some barked at shadows, others chased butterflies with clumsy joy. Each carried scars, visible or not, yet all had found a place to start again. Caleb stood by the fence, clipboard in hand, checking the list of adoptions scheduled for the weekend. His hair had grown a little whiter, but there was a lightness in his face that hadn't been there in years. He wore a faded green flannel and work gloves stained from repairing kennels. Beside him, Atlas lay stretched out on the porch, head resting on his paws, golden eyes half closed, as he watched Lily painting flowers along the wooden sign. Lily was taller now, her freckles more scattered, her hair pulled into a messy braid streaked with sunlight. At 10 years old, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already learned how precious gentleness could be. Dad, she said without looking up, can we keep the new pup in the front enclosure? He seems scared of the others. Caleb nodded. Good thinking. You've got a better sense for them than I ever did. She smiled. You just have to listen with your heart. Atlas taught me that." At the sound of his name, the shepherd lifted his head, tail thumping softly. The old limp was gone now, though a faint line of scar still marked his hind leg, a reminder of what he'd endured. His coat shimmered bronze in the light, and his ears perked whenever Lily laughed. As Caleb turned to stack a bale of straw, a pickup truck pulled up along the gravel path. A woman in her 50s stepped out, tall, gray-streaked hair tucked beneath a red scarf. "Morning, Mr. Hayes," she called. "I'm here about the adoption." Caleb smiled, shaking her hand. "You must be Mrs. Porter. Come on in." She crouched as a golden retriever ambled over, wagging shyly. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, stroking its muzzle. "You've been waiting for someone, haven't you?" Caleb watched quietly as the woman knelt, her eyes soft with the same tenderness he'd seen countless times that year. "They always find who they're meant to," he said. Once the paperwork was done, Mrs. Porter hugged him and whispered, "Thank you for doing what you do." Then she drove off, the retriever sitting proudly in the passenger seat, nose out the window. Lily came to stand beside her father, watching the truck disappear down the road. "Do you think they'll be happy?" she asked. Caleb rested a hand on her shoulder. "I think they already are." They walked back toward the house. The yard was alive with motion, Scout chasing a butterfly, Hope dozing under the pine, 2 new rescues wrestling in the grass. Atlas followed behind, his steps slow but steady, his gaze sweeping over his little kingdom. Later that afternoon, as clouds drifted lazily over the ridge, Caleb found himself on the porch with a cup of coffee, the old Bible open beside him. He wasn't reading so much as remembering. The wind through the pines carried the faint sound of laughter from the yard. "You were right, Sarah," he murmured, looking toward the sky. "Kindness never really dies. It just waits to be passed on." Atlas padded up beside him, pressing his head gently against Caleb's knee. The man chuckled, scratching behind his ears. "You kept your promise too, didn't you, boy?" The shepherd tilted his head, as if listening. The late sunlight caught in his fur, turning it to copper flame. Inside, Lily was hanging photos on the wall, one of the rescue team in the snow, another of the grand opening day when half the town came to help build fences and paint kennels. At the center of them all was a framed picture, Lily hugging Atlas the day after the storm. Her smile, wide and tear-streaked, was pure faith. Evening settled over Silver Creek in a wash of gold and violet. The pines whispered in the breeze, their needles shimmering like 1,000 tiny prayers. Lily stepped out onto the porch, holding a small tin of paint. "Dad," she said, "I think we should add something to the sign." "Oh yeah? What's that?" She dipped her brush and wrote carefully beneath the name, "Saved by Love." Caleb smiled. "That about sums it up." They sat together in the quiet, watching the sky darken. The first stars began to blink through the twilight. Somewhere in the woods, an owl hooted, and Scout barked once in reply. Lily leaned her head against her father's arm. "You know, I think Mom would have liked this place." "I know she would," Caleb said softly, "because it's built the way she lived, one act of kindness at a time." Atlas lay at their feet, eyes half closed, tail sweeping the porch in slow, contented rhythm. For the first time since Sarah's death, Caleb felt peace, not the loud kind, but the quiet peace that comes when everything broken has finally found its place again. The moon rose over the ridge, silver light spilling across the yard. The dogs stirred, lifting their heads toward it, their breath rising like mist in the cool night air. Caleb watched them, a smile tugging at his lips. "You know," he said, "the world could learn a thing or two from you, Atlas." The shepherd blinked, then gazed out across the field, where once there had been fear and silence. Now there was laughter, life, and love. And in that small haven beneath the pines, Grace lived quietly, on 4 paws and a heartbeat. Sometimes God does not send thunder to show his power. Sometimes he sends a whisper, wrapped in fur and faith, to remind us that his miracles often arrive in small, quiet ways. Atlas was not just a rescue dog. He was proof that even the most wounded hearts can love again. That grace can be found in the ordinary days, and that redemption often begins with a single act of compassion. In our own lives, we all meet storms, moments when hope feels too far, when love feels too fragile. But if we choose kindness, if we open our doors the way Caleb and Lily did, we might just discover that God's light never left us. It simply waited to shine through our mercy. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still walk among us. Leave a comment to tell us how it made you feel, and type Amen if you believe that God still works through love, through loyalty, and through the smallest acts of goodness. May He bless you and your family, protect your home, and fill your days with the same quiet peace that lives under the pines. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, hope, and second chances.